today's session, two main topics that we're going to be focusing on. If I was to split this kind of in half, right, in two different ideas, the very first one is all structured around the ways that we communicate with our clients using Matrix, right? We're going to focus on a main tool, one of the most commonly used tools, which is the idea of the auto email. Some TREB members might call that looking for prospects. We're going to break down that whole idea, right? What does it encompass? What does your client have access to? What does it look like from their perspective? And also, how do we get notified when perhaps they're using some of the tools in there and they're trying to communicate with us a little bit? So that whole private conversation that we're having within the portal, it's going to be the whole first half of this session. As soon as we've concluded with that, we're going to move over to topic number 2, which is, as you heard in the long-winded introduction there in the video training bank, the second half is all about the input tab. So hopping in, what does it look like? Setting up a really good foundation for, when you're ready to post a listing on Matrix, on the MLS system here. Okay, so topic number 1, we'll call it auto email. Topic number 2, the input function. So let's get right into it. Of course, as was mentioned, in Tuesday's session with regards to the introduction, we did a little bit of searching for listings. We set up a little bit, had an idea of like what the preview looked like. Well, really good time to explain. I mean, the portal concept, okay, very, very crucial there. When we are sending listings to our clients, it's really important to understand that we're sending our clients an interactive tool that they use to view listing information. Okay, we call this the client portal because that's how they access the listing information that we share with them. It's really, really important to note that just that concept, because we're not just like, if I select one random listing, let's say it's in Milton, and I just email it to my client, well, they're not going to receive a piece of paper that just has listing information on it. They're getting an interactive tool called the client portal, and there's a whole bunch of different features in there that you do want to get familiar with, because your client might actually ask you some questions about it. There's a whole lot going on in there, right? Interactive maps, different features that we're going to see in a second. What we're trying to do for today is we're taking that to kind of the next level, right? The whole concept of the auto email is we're going to take a certain set of criteria to break down a certain, maybe 5 or 10 listings that are of interest for a particular client. And how the auto email works is down the road, a few days from now, if a new listing meets the criteria that we've set out, well, that would automatically, in the form of an auto email, reach the client's portal, and they can access that listing information as well. So just one of the more commonly used tools, because it keeps your client in the loop, keeps a little bit of engagement there, and it's a really kind of easy kind of back and forth, keeps everybody on the same page with regards to new and flowing information. In order to set up an auto email from the start, however, we first have to begin by tracking down some listings. So how do we approach that? Let me see, the idea that we're going to go with for today, we're going to say that hypothetically one of our clients is looking for a couple of neighborhoods. I'm going to go a little bit outside of what I track down some similar ones in Oakville. I'm going to go a little bit outside of that. Let's go into Milton today and find some listings in that area. We're going to say it's going to be a couple of neighborhoods that they've set out kind of southeast of Milton, a little bit general there, but we'll have a closer look in a second. Maybe we'll do some form of a price range around, we'll keep it pretty condensed. We'll go 1.2 to 1.3 million, and they're just going to be houses. We're going to weed out all the condominiums and stuff like that. We're going to stick with just active properties. So where do we start when we want to set that up? Well, let's go ahead and just kind of create that idea a little bit as we walk through the residential search tool. Okay? Any search we run, of course, is going to be very, very similar with regards to our understanding of the criteria screen. But let's check, where would we normally start here? If you happen to catch my session on Tuesday, you would know that I'm a very, very visual person, right? So, I mean, one way that we have to start breaking down our location perhaps is by using this area breakdown. Maybe we start with region, maybe we type in Milton as a city. I like to go straight to the visual part, however. So you'll see me a lot of times going straight to the map. Before I start with price, before I start with all the other stuff, I really, really like going straight to the map and using that as my base. So I can kind of get a really good glimpse of visually where I'm going to be working. So I'm pretty much just zooming in here, going to track down a little bit of Milton. Okay, right now, as I get closer and closer, I might end up a little bit of a distracting with the amount of pins that are here actually. So from time to time, you'll probably see me just put up a rectangle or a random shape a little bit off to the side. What happens when you draw on your map is it takes away the pins, because I specifically chose a spot that didn't have any active listings. It's just kind of out here, really kind of rural area here on purpose. I'm looking to work in Milton, but now that the pins are at least gone temporarily, right, I'm going to get rid of that rectangle later, but it just lets me see the streets a whole lot better. I'll be activating all those pins shortly. That's just to kind of help me out a bit. The next main tool that I'm going to be using for this is the neighborhood layer. So if I go over my tools here, I'll track down layers. I'm going to activate the neighborhood layer. It gives me an overlay on top of the map here to help me. I'm not very familiar with the Milton area, I'm not going to lie. So having this here to kind of help me out a little bit is going to kind of go a long way. We said that we were going to stick more kind of like southeast regions here. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to draw over this section here. It's going to include these neighborhoods where Yates Drive is, things like 4th Line. Let me go ahead and grab each of these ones here, maybe in a 4. And I know down here we're probably getting really rural. There probably won't be many listings in that spot, but we have 2 solid neighborhoods here that maybe apply to what our client was looking for. Yeah, we have a lot more in those main 2. And here we are. Now that I have a section that's popping through those pins, I'm probably going to just deactivate the neighborhood tab. I'm left with the drawing that we made. Delete that shape that wasn't really serving a purpose other than masking the listings. And I can see we're starting with a base now of 76 listings. So kind of we're a little bit away from the more downtown area, of course, but we have quite a few to work from. And even by just taking a really quick hover here, it's looking likely that I am going to find some in our client's price range, which we mentioned was, just for this example, 1.2 to 1.3 million. Okay, let's go ahead, and at this point, and this is something that you'll definitely notice anytime that I'm working on a certain set of criteria and I'm looking at a number of matches that I'm trying to refine here, I'm constantly going to be working through the 3 main tabs that we have here: results, the map, and back to criteria. And at all times, anytime that I make a choice or I make a selection on one of these screens, I'm just really conscious of how it affects my total matches. Okay. The reason why I mention it that way, right? We just, if you click too many things at once, it's certain that you're going to hit 0 matches pretty quickly. So I like to take this approach where I just do kind of one thing at a time, keep an eye on how things change. So it looks like we weren't looking for conditional. Just for this example, got rid of 5 of our listings. We know that house is going to be one of them that we're going with, and we almost cut them straight in half just with like a couple of selections here, for example. Now, what's going to happen when we enter our price range, right? I saw a whole bunch that were kind of 700, 800, 900,000. There were some that were above our price range as well. Probably going to see a drastic change here as soon as we enter, and looks like, yeah, we just ended up with 5 matches in this case. Okay, but just like that, right? We haven't selected very much. So it just goes to show we have active, house, a price range, and a very refined area, which we've made up with regards to a drawing. And we're left with 5 specific listings just for now. Okay, it looks like the way it happened too. Oh, over here we have some 4-bedroom, 3-bath, and then a couple here that have 4, and 5-bedroom, 4-bath. Okay, so a pretty decent kind of spread out in where they ended up as well. The way it was kind of cut up, it looks like we have probably 3 or so neighborhoods that this all kind of gets broken down into. Now, what do we do with those listings, right? Go over to our results. We can have a closer look at what it was that we ended up with, right? We chose a very specific price range, just like 100K plus or minus there, right? You're probably going to spend a whole bunch more time and get really specific on, in case there is a little bit that this can move. But I think R5 is a really, really good start here to getting into that auto email feature. Something to always double check as well. Notice that below your single line display here, where you can see all 5 different MLS listings. Below the results, you always have a summary of the criteria that you've broken down. In our case, we can see, right? We saw it on a second ago because there's so few that we kind of just ended up saying them out loud, but we have residential, active, house. Our latitude, longitude line is with regards to our drawing. Then we have a specific price here. These 5 lines of criteria is how we're refining what we know to be a massive amount of data on the MLS system, right? As we kind of talked about and touched on during Tuesday's session, we are sharing information, listing information with, I don't know the exact number right now, 21 specific boards that are all participating under ITSORealEstate.ca, okay? Well, refining those thousands and thousands of listings that are currently active, these 5 lines is how we've gone about that. Okay, so we've kept it pretty specific in our example in this case. Now, how do we turn this into that auto email feature? Okay, no selections that we have to make thus far. I mean, of course, we're probably going to be hopping into each of these individually, kind of breaking down, seeing if it's something more specific for kind of all those really, really refined things that our clients might be looking for, right? We may end up selecting one and just kind of discarding it if it doesn't apply to what they're after, but we're working with 5. So let's go ahead and choose all of them. And what we're doing is we're going to go to the save feature just below this kind of set of columns here. And the option we're looking for is right here under save, new auto email. I'm going to click on that option here. It puts me into a new screen where now I'm saving a new auto email. And you kind of just work through this form from top to bottom. We're going to break down each piece in more detail, but just kind of notice, right? When you get here, maybe have a quick glance. Notice that even though it's an auto email, like at the end of the day, we are just really setting up like an email service. So it's going to have, you know, a contact, a subject. There's going to be a message followed by my signature most likely, and then just a couple of features that, you know, we're going to be breaking down towards the bottom of the screen here. Okay, so let's have a closer look at that in just a second. I do have a message here that just came through. Hey, just curious, why these listings start with TW? Okay, so really, really great question there. As part of kind of all those boards that we share information with, there is one current private data agreement with OMDREB. It just happened that the specific area that I took a snippet of for today, it just happened to be that in that area, those listings are actually coming through from an agent that posted them on the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. Okay, there is currently oh geez, I'm almost getting ahead of myself here. So this is going to be a long-winded answer. Prepare yourself. It's not an easy thing to just explain in one sentence, but how this agreement currently works, okay, is if a property is listed in the areas which envelop the OMDREB board, which is Oakville, Milton, and Halton Hills. Okay, so geographically, the property must be listed in those areas. And if that's the case, there's a two-way street, and it's a private data agreement that happens between OMDREB members and OMDREB members. Okay, so if myself as an OMDREB member, if I listed a property in Oakville, sorry, we're in Milton, so I'm just going to stick with that. If I list a property right now in Milton, OMDREB members can see it on their MLS system. Okay, we'll go through, they would see it geographically because it's in Milton. The same thing would happen when a Toronto agent lists a property in Milton, OMDREB members can see it. And it ends there, okay? Even though we share information with 21 boards on ITSORealEstate.ca, those extra boards are, example, like Cambridge, Guelph, Waterloo, things like that, right? Well, those boards would not be seeing the TW listing. That's a private listing that only OMDREB members can see. Okay, and it was a TREB agent that listed a property in the Milton area, which resulted in that. That TW, it's just the letter T is our identifier so that we know that it came through that shared Toronto feed. Okay, W would be the actual start of the MLS number, which just means West Toronto. So if you ever see a shared listing, it will always start with TW. By default, our area just happens to be the west part of any listing a Toronto agent puts up. We put a T in front so we can identify it. So if I went back to the searches, okay, I just brought these up, right? The 5 that we have in question just for today's example happen to be, right? Sometimes, of course, you're going to see like a 4011 type of more general listing that a member put on ITSORealEstate.ca, probably starts with a 401 identifier. These were through the share feed, and we know because of that T identifier. Okay, and then the true MLS number, if you searched for it on the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, it would start with the W. The T is just our identifier. Hopefully that answers the question. And it is a pretty like long-winded answer. I do apologize, but if there's any like follow-up questions or anything like that, let me know, and I'll do my best to kind of fill in the blanks there. I'm going to go back into that new auto email screen, however, and let's take a kind of a walkthrough. We'll go top to bottom actually as we work through, and I'll give you some pointers on each thing, right? The top part is just really organizing general email features. We can see our criteria is coming up, and then we have some settings that we're going to discuss in conclusion, especially this schedule and things like concierge mode. So we'll be sure to break all of that down. All right, so the first part is assigning the contact, right? Who is going to be receiving this auto email? So I think I'm just going to start by choosing, probably going to change that a bit later on, but I'll just choose my OMDREB email. You could see mine are all just versions of me as tests with like kind of testing emails and stuff like that. Let's go ahead with this one here. Okay, subject line. I mean, the first part's pretty straightforward, right? I'm going to go Milton properties of interest. Let's go with that. I mean, this could be anything you want it to be, right? I mean, at the end of the day, whatever your rapport is and your relationship that you've created with your client, it could be personal, it could be extremely professional, totally up to you. In the next section, you'll notice there are 2 different types of emails that you'll be preparing. The first email, this welcome email, has great significance with regards to your auto email. Okay, and what I mean by that is just the nature of the auto email makes it such that there is a portion that happens automatically and will continue to run until you either deactivate it or whatever the case may be. As a result, it needs to be properly activated in the first place. And that happens from the welcome email. Okay. First thing, notice that I can change this paragraph in any way that I'd like. Oh, I just hit enter a bunch of times there, right? So you can change this up however you'd like to edit this message, make it a little bit more professional or whatever the case may be for your scenario. Okay. Have a read through that. It's just a welcome email. However, that part that is really, really crucial when I mention this is an automated service is this final link. So if you're gonna like cut things out and change the email, just be really, really certain that this line or some indication of what this is trying to say is still in there so that your client can see, which is please click on the link below to begin your portal experience. The auto email will never move to active status and start sending new listings unless your client formally clicks on that link. That's how it begins the process. Okay, that's how they activate it and actually start it up. We're going to talk a whole lot more about how to know when it's active, how to follow up and that kind of stuff. But for now, like this is probably out of the whole welcome email, this is probably one of the most important things, just so that they are aware that they are to be clicking on that link to actually activate it, to get it started. Okay, so here we are with the welcome email. If you do make any changes to it and you would like those to be changes that are there the next time, you create an auto email, well, just be sure to update that in the little gear icon below. So if I click on that, I'll see that I can set the current message as the default welcome email text. Or I can always reset to the system default. Mine is just the system default, but if you changed yours, right, be sure to follow it up by actually updating that as the new default for your welcome text. Okay. Same thing's going to happen for the recurring email, right? If I change it, if I make something so that it's a little bit more personalized, follow it up with changing the recurring email text. The section, and as you can see, how much text is written in this spot is a lot more simplified in the recurring email. But just so you know, right, this is generally what they'd be receiving if, let's say, 2-3 days down the road, a new listing meets our criteria that we've set out, and it's going to make its way into our client's, wow, I'm losing a client's portal. Once it's in our client's portal type of thing, and as it makes its way in, well, they would receive this recurring email, a little bit of a notification, hey, 1 or more new listings matched your search criteria, and it might give like a little bit of a link or like a quick description of that new listing that made its way into the portal. Okay, so again, you can change either of those messages up. If ever editing your signature or creating something here, you can always just click on the edit signature link as well. Kind of wraps up the more straightforward portions here with regards to just getting that email started. Now we get into criteria. So as I mentioned a few moments ago, right, when we were looking below the results kind of chart of our 5 listings, well, it showed us a summary of those pieces of criteria that we're using to refine this huge amount of data and how we're getting it down to the just few listings that we want to start with. We have our residential, active, house, the drawing on our map, and our price range that we set out for this example. Okay, so we could see that if a new listing hits the market 6 days from now and it meets specifically these 5 pieces, well, then it would be in our client's portal and they would get the recurring email as a bit of a description there. Okay. All right, next up, settings. I might double back actually. I'm gonna have to make a quick change because we'll talk about concierge mode last actually because it's a more specific concept. Let's go ahead and talk about the schedule in this case. There's something very, very distinct and very different between a daily schedule and the way that the ASAP email works. Okay, the schedule is all talking about how perhaps the recurring email or how your client receives email notifications or reminders. Okay, and they're very, very different in nature. So first off, you have to, I'll tell you the pros and cons of both, I guess, because like different scenarios are going to call for one or the other for sure. So as far as the schedule, if I was to start by talking about as soon as possible, okay, emails are sent as soon as possible. This scenario would mean that if a new listing a few days from now meets our criteria, as soon as that listing is kind of noticed by the market or noticed by the system that it meets this criteria, your client would receive a notification, hey, 1 or more new listings match your criteria. It would provide that email, and it would also now be available in your client's portal, assuming that they've already clicked on that welcome letter, on that link to properly activate it. Okay, that's as soon as possible. So what this means is, technically, I mean, ours is very refined. We only had 5 listings come through. Let's say that I had it very open and it was maybe instead of a potential buyer that I was working with, what if this was actually one of my colleagues? And my colleague, perhaps they just wanted me to set this up so that we can keep an eye on the market. What if it was just like open market of all of Milton? Well, there would be hundreds and hundreds of listings coming in perhaps on a weekly basis. I might be a little bit weary to use something like as soon as possible in that case. Okay, so we're pretty refined. We're probably okay to go with as soon as possible. What I want to do is just I want to be a little bit aware of how many, what's the probability that I'm going to bombard my client if I choose this option. And I think we're pretty safe with how we broke ours down. But as soon as possible, we'll send an email every time something new reaches that portal. And we'll give a little description of it as a recurring email. Daily is very, very different than that. Okay? And it's very different in the sense that it is not bound in any way by something new occurring, actually. This email goes out regardless. Okay? If I choose in the mornings that I'm sending a reminder email on a daily basis, on Sunday morning, Monday morning, to all the way throughout every single day of the week, if I kind of just choose this default, that's every single day, my client will receive an email every single morning, no matter what. And what I mean by that is, if this is so refined that nothing changes, let's say for the next 9 days, that nothing new happens to hit the market in that area, my client is still going to have 9 emails in their inbox every single morning, reminding them that they have a portal and a link to the portal. Okay, so just be aware of this massive difference here in how this one works, right? If we're working this out and we're just saying, hey, you know what, like the day conversation with my client here and the day that they're more interested and more likely to look at the listing information is on Saturday and or Sunday, we just choose those 2 days as a reminder. Okay, well, they're getting, no matter what, 2 emails per week. If 5 new listings came in between now and Saturday, well, this email is going to speak on it. It's going to give a little summary of it, but they're getting it no matter what. They're getting it whether there's 5 new ones or whether there's 0 new ones. This one's more of a reminder and provides a link with access. So I hope that that's really, really, really clear. In that other example that I gave a second ago, where I know ours is very refined, but if I was using this auto email to keep an eye on the market and I sent hundreds of listings to one of my colleagues, right, I would probably just steer away from ASAP straight away, go to a daily email, and I could just kind of make whatever selection, right? I'm probably not going to send them a reminder every single morning kind of thing, but you know, a couple times is going to be fine. And 2 emails a week is going to be a lot better than 100 emails per week, if that ends up being what works out. With this one, just for that example, if I did like open search of all of Milton, let's say, okay. Ours, however, is quite refined, as we talked about. I'm not going to use this schedule. We're just going to go with as soon as possible, expecting that there's a good probability I'm not going to bombard my client, and it would be really good to have the ASAP because it might be a couple days before something meets our exact, very refined criteria. Okay, so that's as soon as possible. Monthly, if you are wondering, it acts just like daily. Okay, so instead of being like a couple times a week, that reminder is going to go out just once a month. So if it's someone that's just kind of passively keeping an eye once a month, they just want to see some things, well, this one would give them that reminder that they have a portal they can always access, gives them the link and a little summary of what's happened in the last month. Okay, we're going to go with as soon as possible, though. I'm going to make a quick swap up here. Let's go with that. Change the email so that I could talk about a different concept to govern the schedule, which is concierge mode. This is a totally different way to manage how your client receives listings and how they get those notifications. Okay, so what concierge mode means, and you'll notice here, if I activate it, the schedule goes away. Notice how there was a schedule down here. If I check off concierge mode, the schedule gets removed because it's just governed in a different way how those notifications go out. Okay, concierge mode means that you would prefer to act as a little bit of a filter in between the system and the listings that meet your client. So you would kind of go in the middle and have like a final say on, should I approve these 3 and should I maybe, you know, discard a couple of these and only send the ones to my client that they're interested in. That would be the idea, that you're acting as a concierge, as an intermediary in between what the system finds and what your client actually receives. You would be the concierge, okay? Times that you might activate this, right? Well, usually I'd suggest using this one if your client is very, very peculiar about like a really specific thing about the listing, right? Like maybe your client's looking for an in-law suite and only listings that have a really specific pool option or something like that. Things that might be a little bit tough to do in an automated way, well, I'd probably pop those into concierge mode and just manually keep an eye on them to make sure that they're only getting the listings that they're looking for. Kind of last thing you want, right, is your client just contacting you, hey, like, why did you send me this? I wasn't interested in this property. Doesn't mean anything that I was looking for. Well, concierge mode might help you manage that a little bit better if your client's really, really specific. Okay, and I'll show you how to manage the concierge mode after we're finished with this. It's really, really easy how you could just approve those specific ones as well. Okay, so we'll look at that in a few moments. As you can see though, right, what would end up happening is if, let's say, I had a few that I have to choose whether I want to push them through to the portal, and I choose 2 of them and I activate just those to go to my client's portal, well, they would receive a notification at that time. So it would be acting really close to an ASAP email in that case, if I had concierge mode on. It's just going to send them the notification if I approve the ones to go to their actual portal. Okay. The very last thing to mention is quite important as well. Okay. When it comes to, and this applies to when you're sending an individual listing in the form of an email, multiple listings and just as a normal email, you can always change the display of that listing. Be extremely cautious with how you approach this, however, okay, but I do want to point it out since it is available. If you're ever looking to change it, right, if maybe a cooperating agent or another colleague is saying, or just kind of reaching out to you and saying, hey, can you share this particular listing? I would like it in member full. I would like access to the private information, the seller information, the private remarks, commission structure, all that kind of stuff. In order to give them that access, you would change the display to member full. This is the spot where you do that. It's under this additional link. Okay, a lot of common misconceptions that happen about where you make this change. Well, it's actually here in the additional dropdown. Okay, what happens is by default, any email you send is going to be in client full version, which is suppressed. It's going to hide the seller information. It's going to hide the commission structure and other private and sensitive information just by default. So if I don't change anything, it'll be client full. If I am in fact setting up an auto email to go through to my colleague or to a cooperating agent, I might, depending on their, if they would prefer that, I might change it to member full, however. So I click on additional through the drop down, track down the member full display. Okay, and we can save and go through to approvals later on, that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm not actually going to change it to member full. I'd like to keep ours as just a regular example. But of course, right, I'm not going to change this. The reason why I want you to be really careful is you're not going to change this for every single email you send. Sending through the commission structure to every potential buyer is going to start being a little bit worrisome. So, right, you're going to use this just for specific purposes, specific times. But I want you to know where it is. So I'm going to keep this as the default, knowing that it's just going to do a client full version in that case. Okay, and let's go ahead and we'll switch that back to my email now that we have had the chance to talk about concierge mode. The only reason why it's grayed out, by the way, is just you cannot concierge mode yourself. I can't be the intermediary for my own emails. This is just, right, I have to go with something down here on the schedule, but I did want to kind of click that. I chose a different email just to show you that. But let's go with that. I'm going to go as soon as possible, knowing that ours is really refined. We have client full version, and I'm going to hit save. Should add a pop-up. Created auto email Milton properties of interest. Okay. As far as what we're expecting right now as well, right? The auto email that we've set up is, it's currently in limbo. It's not going to be active and working properly until our client goes in and clicks that welcome letter, clicks on that link. So always kind of keep that in mind. We're going to start looking at statuses in just a second. We'll follow up on that. There's just one quick question that I saw pop in that I just want to go over real quick. And then we're going to hop into the statuses of the auto emails through our My Matrix menu in just a sec. So the question that came in was, can you go over the client full, member full one more time, please? Yes, absolutely. So let me show you in a different example. Okay, let's say that I was just going into a random listing. I'm not going to put too much bearing on this. I'm just going to choose a random listing. It happened that we chose 2317 Moody Court in Oakville. Okay, and if I was to email this to a client, I would click on email. Very similar to how you saw it in that other kind of the other screen for the auto email, is that there's a line called display, and that is how you switch the actual display of what they're going to see. Okay, because what they're going to get, we know, is going to be a portal. However, whoever I email this to, they're going to receive a link to a portal to access the listing information for Moody. What was it Moody Court? I'm already forgetting. Sorry. They're going to get a portal that will let them access the listing information. The way that they actually see that listing information laid out, though, has to do with the display right here. And under additional, if we don't do anything and we just leave it as the default, the system is set up that it would do it in client full, which means sensitive information is suppressed. Things such as the seller name, the brokerage remarks, the private remarks, right? The commission structure that's inside of that brokerage information, things like that in a client version are not there. They're suppressed. They're kind of hidden by default, because that's like private information that isn't meant for everyone in the public type of thing, right? You're going to formally make the choice to display that information if it is for an individual that's meant to see it. Okay, and that's where you kind of switch to those other views under additional. If I drop down this additional, there's a whole bunch of different views in here, but the two really main ones are going to be client full and member full. Where member full would be the view that you just saw when you were looking at it. Okay, so if I, like even if I hit preview here, right, we can see it's going to load the client portal. If my if my internet allows us, it's just kind of pinwheeling here. Apologies, we'll give it a second. There we go. It was Moody Court. Okay, perfect. If I hop into Moody Court, I would expect that if I scroll down, for example, on the listing information below the rooms or wherever it ends up being, I'm not going to see the brokerage remarks, for example. However, if I change this display to include the sensitive information, which is called the memberful version, when I go to preview it, should look a little bit different. Should have, well, there we go. Right off the bat, we can see the seller name, right? That was masked. If we scroll down, we could see a section called brokerage information. This was not here before. I wasn't able to see that there was a 2.5% plus HST commission structure. This was all hidden from the default client full version. But if a cooperating agent asked me for this version of the listing, I would be changing it to member full so they can see all this info. You see what I'm saying? Yep, no worries. So let me close this up. But just notice, like, the display in the email screen, just like it was in the auto email screen, you have to change it here for the recipient to see a different display. Okay, what I mean by that, and where there's a common misconception a lot of the time, where you see display over here, you see that it's member full, that's your version. That's what you're looking at. I can see the seller because by default, my account of Hello Eric is set to look at memberful versions as a member of OMDREB, as like you are kind of a registered salesperson. This isn't, you're going to see all the information. It's not going to be masked by default. You're not going to see, if I could find a client full version here, there we go, right? If I switch it to client full, I just lost the seller name. You're not looking at listings on the MLS system in client full. You're looking at them in member full because you're a member. I hope that all of that kind of, there was a couple of questions that came through here, but I'll just try to have a browse, and we may have to talk about this a little bit further in the Q&A if it comes to that. Give me a second here. Yes, I think a couple of these were answered in what I just had said. Okay, there was one, and I might have to address this one a bit later on just so we could stay on pace with just the content, but I have one that was mentioned, hey, I generally go through hot sheets, pick out the listings, and after viewing them, I email them to clients. Is it quicker to concierge, or is it basically the same? Well, you have to understand that what you just described is totally different than like the time that concierge mode comes up is when you're inside of setting up an actual auto email. Did you want any, the first question that you have to answer for yourself is this part of the service? Is there a part of the service that you want to actually automate? Because what you described was not automated in any way. You just did it manually. Okay, so if you send a general email, no problem. That's a great way to share listing information with your clients. You're going to send a portal where they access directly the info that you send to them. The concept of an auto email is totally different than that, though. So if you're comparing the two, the first question you have to ask yourself is, do I want to automate any part of this so that my client is receiving new information that the system can provide them? Did you want to automate any portion of that? That's what the auto email is going to start doing. Let's say that I send my client 2 emails, or like an email with 2 listings. That's great. 3 days later, I have to create a new one and send 3 new listings that I found. That's just kind of a normal sharing of information. If I set up an auto email, however, maybe those 3 new ones could have been sent automatically and I didn't have to do the work. That's what you're saving by setting up an auto email. It just sets up a service where the system is going to send listings automatically and push them to your client's portal where they can see that info. And then you have like a bit of a loop of back and forth communication that's happening. I hope that kind of explains it, because we'll talk about that a little bit more in case there's a follow-up to your question there. But you're looking at a couple of concepts that are really, really different. So just bringing in that word concierge is like you have to decide if it's going to be an auto email first. Okay, we'll get back to that though. As I said, let's jump into the statuses of the auto email, because we definitely have some things to cover before we jump into topic number 2. So where we want to go is in this My Matrix dropdown into the auto email section, where we're going to kind of follow up and look at the things that we set up. Okay. So you'll notice the ones that I have here, mainly just kind of testing and putting things together for very similar clients here. Okay. And we'll notice I do have 2 here, and apologies there. The reason for that is because prior to the session, usually before I start the session, as you can see, this one here was created at 1:43. I created this one before we started the session. After I kind of was running around getting some stuff done, I set this one up a little bit earlier. I just wanted to make sure that I had something, because what happens is sometimes, and this one I did receive, which is really nice. I do see it 3 minutes ago, we had the welcome email come in, which is awesome. I'll bring it down from the other, I had it on my other screen here. But just in case the system hadn't sent it to me yet, I wanted to be able to show you a welcome email. So I usually set that one up before the session so that I have something in case it hadn't arrived. So I've seen it sometimes where the welcome email will send out, and in our case, I think what was it? I think it said 1:43. So it looked like it took about 6 minutes for it to arrive. I've seen it take like 30 minutes, 45 minutes sometimes. So just because of that, I did want to have one ready. That's why you're seeing 2 there. Let's go ahead and zoom in actually. I'm going to go, it's not all the text that I'll be able to zoom in on, but at least you'll be able to see the welcome part a little bit better. I'm just using Outlook here. A couple of things with regards to the welcome email that we got though. Okay, first, it came from a specific source. So the destination where it's sent from was the MLS system. It came from on MLS at northcentralmatrixmail.com. That's the emailing service that is going to be sending them through. So we know that that's the reliable source kind of thing, if ever you wanted to just make a mental note of that. Okay, we see that the system does refer to the client. This was the client that we chose. Okay. Gives us our welcome. the paragraphs that we saw, followed by that really important line about clicking on the link. And now we can get a little visualization here of what that link looks like. So there's a view all listings button. And when we click on that link, it takes us through to the portal. Okay. Just for myself, yeah, you know what, why not? Let's go ahead and click on it. Okay, so now we would have clicked on the link and actually activated that portion of the auto email. I'll have to delete it later so that I can always have a new kind of open status. But here we are. We can see that there's those 5 properties in that portal. Okay, so I'll just close that auto email there. I did want to go back to this screen though. So what we could see is, well, there's 3 different types of statuses that we're going to be working through. One would be this disabled image. One is that welcome status. It's kind of in limbo, right? It's just awaiting the client to fully activate it by clicking on the link. And when they've clicked on it, and when that's confirmed and the system kind of gets back the info saying, hey, yep, the client's confirmed, perfect, it's going to move to this status right here, where if I hover it, it says active status. So this one said, client must click first email's link to activate. And this is the actual active status. Maybe I could try and zoom in. Whoa, that zoomed in really quick, actually. I don't even know how I zoomed in that fast, but I'm gonna have to. Okay, so this is the active status. It's like a filled in check mark. So like a green background, white check mark. This was the in limbo of that original one. Okay, let me try to zoom back out. My goodness. Sorry about that. Hopefully that didn't throw anybody off. I really did zoom in quite quickly there. It just jumped like really close in. So here we have with the active status, the one that's in limbo. Let me go in one more time. There we go. So with regards to each of these auto emails as well as we manage them, right? I'm eventually going to have a whole bunch of these all set up for different clients. I might disable them for different reasons. I might kind of activate new ones for different reasons. That's all kind of moving forward. And how you manage your auto emails is by going a little bit further into these little drop downs. Set up like a little bit of an accordion menu. Okay. So if I go ahead and I just open this one up here, the one that we had run at 1:43 p.m., well, we could see more information about this one. Okay. We can always go in and update the settings, the criteria. We can look at the results. We can actually open it in the portal so we can have a look from our client's perspective as well. And if for any reason we could see that perhaps our client reaches out and says, hey, you know, I lost that welcome email. I know I haven't activated it yet. You do have a period where you can resend a new welcome as well. Okay, so just notice you have some things that you can choose towards the top. If the welcome email has in fact been sent, then you're going to notice this new box pop up towards the bottom. Here's where you can look at all of the times that an email was sent to your client. If I open this up, I'll see that at 1:48 p.m., the initial email was sent out. We saw that it arrived in my inbox and it read 1:49 p.m. Okay, we could see like more information in the accordion, right? Drop one thing down, look at the next one, that type of thing. And it just says never viewed, of course, because it I haven't even refreshed this page or anything like that. But in the next couple of minutes, of course, after I refresh, it's going to come to a check mark on this one. And you'll see that it'll put a timestamp here for when, quote unquote, the client went in and activated or viewed that email. Okay. So we can see all that info. If I was looking at a different one, perhaps like this one here. Well, this one you could see was set up a couple of months ago, and there's actually 5 emails that were sent. Okay. You can see details of all of that different info, right? The emails that were sent, the dates that they were sent, how many new listings were sent, all that kind of stuff. And I could drop these down to get more information. Okay, so you can kind of gauge a lot from this auto email screen. Couple of reasons why something moves to disabled status, however, okay? If your client hasn't gone into that portal for a period of 50 days, so it's like a little bit more than a month and a half, nothing's happened and they don't go in and look at it or anything like that for a large period of time, it automatically does move to a disabled status from that. If I hover some of these, I'm sure I have one in here. So these disabled by agent, disabled by agent. Oh, please tell me I have one that is the 50-day thing. Looks like I might not though. However, this one. Well, regardless, here, let me look at that one. Go to settings. Welcome email ignored by client. Well, this was probably a period of 50 days where it was ignored for. Let me go back to that screen though. Auto emails. We could see that as well. Something has changed, right? The system noticed that client went in there the first time, properly activated it at 1:54. So even though that was a couple minutes ago, now that I finally refreshed, we can see it moved from that other status over to this properly working activated status. Okay. This is the exact same recipient because of the test, so both of them got activated. But if I wanted to disable one, right, I could just select it. I could hit disable, and I'll get rid of that top one. Now there's just the one left, which should be the 143, right? So you can disable them at any time. Let's say your client finds the property, you've set them up, they're not looking for properties just at this time, or maybe it's something that you want to keep for later and like 6 months down the road. It's perhaps a really good setup for your auto email that you want to just keep for later. Well, you can always go in and reactivate an old auto email like this, your future home one. I go into the settings, disabled by agent, right? Maybe I found a property for this client, let's say, and in the settings, I can just change that to enabled and hit save, and we would get the process started again. I hit cancel, but you can always reactivate a disabled one from going back into the settings and looking at that screen that we set up at the start. Okay, awesome. Okay, next up, really need to get into some of the tools that your client is going to have access to inside of the portal. Okay, we've got access to a portal. It's open. It's right here. This is what the client portal looks like. We can see already in the main page of the portal, there's an interactive map they have access to. It shows a bit of a description of all 5 of the listings that we've shared so far. We can see a breakdown here as well. Okay, one of the things they have on this front page though is this little heart. So just bear that one in mind because we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. It's where your client has a couple of features where they may actually be trying to communicate with you in some cases. If I click on that, I can choose to either save this property as a favorite, a possibility, or I can even discard the listing. So maybe I'll make a couple selections and we'll talk about them a bit more. Notice, hey, you know what? This one's a little bit more rural than I was looking for. I'm going to discard that one. Turns out I really like this one. I'm going to set it as a favorite. And this one here, you know what? I'm going to put as a possibility. Now, what in the world does that mean? Well, that's kind of an opinion, right? So it's totally subjective. It just means I might have to reach out to my client to find out why they made one of these selections at the end of the day. Okay, let's hop into, let's go into this one, Trudeau Drive. What you'll notice is the heart carries through. We can always make a selection here, a little bit of a interest indicator, let's call it, where your client can show a bit of interest about the property. And you can see very quickly there's even more kind of interactive tools that they have access to in here, aside from just the listing information in general, which is going to follow down below. And is in client full, because we did go with the default on this one. Another way that our client might be communicating with us is through this notes for you and your agent. This is a private conversation in the portal between your client and yourself. Hey, I really like this one. Can you send me more information? What if your client adds a note at 2:03 p.m.? Your client is trying to reach you, and they might just kind of do it as a note. Maybe the note is just for their own records. Maybe the note is a way that they're trying to ask you an actual question. Well, how do you respond to some of these things in a timely manner? Okay, we have one note that happened. We have a favorite, a possibility, and also a discard. That's where that next part of the notification settings is going to be possibly really important. Okay, I'm actually going to close this up. I don't think we're going to hop in there. So portal notification settings is, by default, nothing is activated, but it's a way that you can stay on top of things and get notified from some of those features. If your client's in the portal doing something specific, sometimes there's some features that might be really good to get a little bit of a heads up on, especially that note, right? I'm going to want to respond hopefully soon enough that it's still relevant. So if you go into your My Matrix under Settings, can also be accessed, as we saw, from this drop-down menu into Settings, takes you to the same spot. We were working in My Information on Tuesday. This time we're actually going to jump to a different one, this notification bell of portal notification settings. If I click on that option, I will notice really quickly here that there's a pretty detailed graph of certain things, or a detailed chart of certain things that I can get notified on my client is interacting with their portal. This is your portal activity notification settings. I can get email notifications for certain things, possibly even text message if that's your preference, or you can do it in the form of an email that's more of a summary of all of them combined. What you'll see here is by default, nothing is checked off, nothing's active, okay? But what this is basically, hey, do I want an email right away that tells me that my client visited the portal for the first time? That's what I would be doing here. Or do I want like a text message that goes straight through and pushes through to my cell phone to tell me, hey, Mark has clicked on that welcome letter. That auto email, I have a little check mark in my head that it's going to be working properly and they'll get listings moving forward. Right? That's what this one would confirm for me, that type of thing. Or maybe I did like 10 of them for 10 different clients today, and instead of individual notifications, maybe I just want a summary of the ones that did click on their welcome letter. Okay, things like that. So you saw that in the portal, I did click on a couple of interest notifiers, like saving a favorite, saving a possibility, discarding a listing, adding a note, visits portal to like however many things you select on here is going to be totally different from one member to another. But I'd say, like, as a good solid start, while I'm setting up auto emails for the first time, I'm probably going to want something like this, or at the very least, like the summary emails of those actions, right? Hey, Julia, why did you discard these 3 listings that I shared with you? Maybe I can change the criteria a little bit so that those aren't coming through if you're not interested in those ones. Or, hey, I saw that you saved a favorite. What did you, was there something specific about the property that you really liked? Is this one that you want to have more information on, right? Being able to know that they interacted in this way. Because in the end, right, if down the road I have like 50 active auto emails that are all working for different clients at the same time, I'm going to start needing these notifications a lot more. But just getting used to them so that you have them, really good here. Good start to setting up that whole process. Okay, so however many things you want in here, totally up to you. Have a thought about that. As far as how the text message system works, it's just below here. If you wanted to set up that text service, you just click on edit your cell information, type in your mobile phone number, and you can choose the provider, and it'll give you like a code to your phone that just confirms that you put in the correct information and stuff like that. Okay. And of course, when you make these changes and you're happy with the notification schedule you've set up, you just hit save at the bottom. For mine though, I'm gonna keep these blank so that it's like that for the next session. Okay, but just remember, right? My Matrix into settings, into portal notification settings. If ever you want to set those up, they're just in that chart here. Beauty. Okay. So that does kind of wrap up our long-winded kind of introduction to this concept of the client portal. Okay? And what I would definitely suggest, just in conclusion here to that first topic, is please recreate even what we set up today. I know we might have gone through some of the things pretty quickly here, but when you have a moment, even just setting up those steps and practicing by doing what I did, and send through an actual auto email, receive it, go through and look at the link, kind of even set that up to go through the motions in case your client asks you some questions about it, just to be a little bit more prepared for that, those features that they might be curious about within the portal. Okay, but just to set a little bit of a foundation, we did go over some things in the portal, of course. Let's totally flip the script and jump into the second topic now, however, which is everything to do with the input function. Okay, so now we're going to start talking about, hey, what steps am I looking to follow if I'm listing a property on the MLS system? Okay, and all of this happens in the add edit Once it's there, I'll start to zoom in on the map and maybe go into like a specific area of Oakville, and you'll start to see that the map will kind of update and continue to change as we get closer and closer. So if I start to kind of zoom in here, I'm hoping that this works. I know it all has to do with how fast my internet can kind of load it, but this map, oh, awesome. Okay, at least it's coming up straight away. That's really good. But we can see right off the bat here, we're seeing some pretty intricate things such as like the property lines, how the addresses are set up. So a really, really different view than what you get from just looking at like a Google map image or something like that. And if I make my way down like pretty quickly here, I went to our current main office for OMDREB being 125 Navy Street, which is the corner of Navy and Church, kind of northwest of, or however you want to call that, north of Lakeshore East. Just right here is 125 Navy, and we can see how it's kind of set out with regards to the property lines, right? Possibly seeing other structures. If I go ahead and click on this, I can already see information. I can go into a more detailed property report. I've got my PIN, my ARN. Property report here is going to give me a whole bunch of like really quick info with regards to the property, some more interactive maps, previous sales, things like that happened. So again, I don't want to spend too much time on GeoWarehouse, but a very, very awesome tool that you can use alongside while you're searching for properties, okay? In our case, where it might be relevant is filling from GeoWarehouse is also going to bring in a little bit of that MPAC data, okay? Go ahead and there we go. So if I go and I bring in some of that info, some of the base that it's going to set up actually is things like, as I mentioned, right? It's going to bring in that info it has. Like, it's very minor. It's probably like 5 to 10 fields that are going to pull in, right? Things to do with my address, my PIN, my ARN, my legal land description. So like some things that I need anyways, and it might be a good way for me to confirm that info as well. I got to bring it over from my property information sheet either way. Maybe I just fill in some of that from Geo, and it gives me a little kind of peace of mind that I have it correct, that kind of thing. Okay, so your 3 ways. You can fill from a previous property, you can get some minor info from Geo, or you can go all the way and just start from totally blank listing. To tell you the truth, the one that I almost always use is this one here, filling from GeoWarehouse. If I know that it's a property I can access on Geo, I'll probably bring in the info. Okay. The next one that I'd probably use is starting from a blank listing. And the very last one that I would ever consider is filling from property, actually. And the reason for that is you want to be extremely careful with this first option. What I mean by that is the first question you want to answer for yourself is, what was I the person that listed this property 6 months ago when it was on the market? If that's the case, then maybe I'll be more comfortable bringing in the MLS information and starting from that base. If it was someone totally different, however, someone that I don't even know, but like I know the property was listed and I wouldn't go pull information from a different individual. The thing with the MLS system to always remember is like we're dealing with a system where there's an expectation of kind of accuracy there with regards to certain fines and things like that. So bringing in info from a different agent, that I'd be a little bit careful with. If they made errors on theirs that kind of fell through the cracks and weren't noticed, but now you're listing it and you're going to be signing off on that and you don't notice those horrible errors being there on their form, you're now taking ownership for it, right? So usually I'd only go for the fill from property if it was something that I listed personally, and when it isn't, go through with a fine-tooth comb, make absolute certain, you know, that everything is correct on there if you're using somebody else's listing information. Okay, it's got to match up with the paperwork that you have at the end of the day. We're going to go with fill from GeoWarehouse though. So option number, kind of the second one here. When you select fill from GeoWarehouse, notice it's now kind of bolded. This means I'm on that option. It gives me 2 ways to begin this. I can either provide the 9-digit PIN, or I can provide some details of the property when I make the link between Matrix and GeoWarehouse. Okay, so one or the other. The step that we're doing here is we're just creating the link between the MLS system, and the MPAC system. Do we want to provide the PIN, or do we want to do this part here? Just keep an eye on this. You have to do, just with regards to the nature that we know of matrix, it's got to be real specific. If I'm doing it this way, I have to enter specifically the city, the street number, and the street name, and then the unit number is optional. So if we're doing it this way, I have to type in Oakville 125 and Navy. We're just going to use we're going to use an example of the Oakville office in our input here. Oakville 125 Navy, and hit search. This is going to look in the system, make that link between matrix and GeoWarehouse, and I have this little confirmation screen here. Click to fill. If this is the correct one, and I believe everything's right on here, well, I would click fill, and then we would get started with the process. Because matrix was so specific, and I had to put in all 3 pieces of information, typically I like to do option number 1 there, where it was just provide the 9-digit PIN. So I'm going to hit cancel real quick. Go back to that, click on fill from GeoWarehouse. And instead of typing in these really rigid, specific pieces that sometimes might be a bit tougher, like we got lucky, it was just like 125 Navy, Oakville, pretty easy stuff to fill out. But what if it's like a really tough one, like, I don't know, unit 57, 552 Fisher Hallman in some city, right? Like, they can get a lot more intricate, and the spelling is going to have to be perfect. I find that this is a lot more of kind of an easier approach. So how would I get the 9-digit PIN? I would just hover tools, click on GeoWarehouse. I find that, as we know, very rigid search on matrix, the GeoWarehouse search is a lot more freeing. If I start typing something like 125 space NAV, I don't have to do the whole city, the whole street, and the whole street number to get to my 9-digit PIN. Search bar is a lot easier to use, so I just opt to go with that. Select, maybe just copy over my 9-digit PIN for the property that I have a visual confirmation of with this little pin that's on there. And I just go back to my other tab, and I can just kind of paste that in, right? Hit search. It'll give me the same exact screen as we got from the previous entry, where we're just ready to fill after confirming that that's the correct one. Okay. So you have those 2 options. You can do the PIN if you want. You can do the search by address if you'd like. I like kind of opting for that one, as you know, because this search bar is a lot easier to work from. But we're here now. When we click on fill, that's going to be the actual start of our information that we're inputting onto the input screen. If I click fill here, and I'll let that load, we'll be on the very first page of the input. You can see that all the tabs of the input are kind of across the top here. We are currently within a residential ad edit, and we're going to generally kind of work through these different screens, and I'll give you some pointers on the things to kind of keep an eye out for. We're going to get used to the layout and how to kind of work from one to the other. Okay. First thing I want to mention, just with regards to this being like a training session, well, generally I'm gonna go more of like a left to right approach, but I don't want you to feel like you're kind of confined in that way. So just so you're aware, right? Like, let's say the first thing that for some reason I really want, and maybe the only thing that I'm planning on doing today, was just to do the rooms, and I want to get that out of the way, and then I'll come back to it later to do the rest. Well, nothing's stopping you from doing that. Okay, I can just jump to the rooms section. I can start filling out the room information, and I could save it as incomplete or that kind of thing, right? I can go to the property tab and just do a couple final things, maybe finish up my address and save it as incomplete, like whatever you'd like to do. So just wanted to show you really quick, like you can navigate this however you'd like. It's not forcing me. It's not like general is step 1 and I cannot go to property till I'm done this one. No, you're more than welcome to go in any direction. Okay. General things to point out, right? When something is optional, it has a white background. When it is mandatory, it has this like yellowy, I don't know what color that is, but it has this background. Okay, so we have optional and mandatory fields. You can see there's a bit of a coloration difference between the 2. These ones I must put some form of a value in. There's 8 mandatory fields on the general tab. There's 2 optional ones, however. Okay. let's go ahead and I'll make some selections. Probably a really good time to throw a little disclaimer out there as well. This is just for practice. I'm not going to choose things that are with regards to 125 Navy Street. I'll tell you right now, right? We're going to put like some, probably going to put like a bathroom on the main floor, a bedroom on the main floor. I know that it's an office building. It's like a multi-story office building in Oakville. We're going to just treat this as like a standard house kind of thing and make some select. Don't get too hung up on whether I choose if it's a condo or not, that kind of thing, or if it's a flat roof or all that. Like, don't worry about that. I'm just going to show you how to go through some of these. My selections might not be the perfect ones, more just to give you a really good idea through this tool. Okay. In the main screen, let's make some selections, however. Okay. I've got about 8 things here that I do have to make a selection of to clear this screen. Something like the property subtype. So yeah, I will say it's a house, actually. We're going to stay pretty general here. It's going to be a detached house. We'll say it is a 2-story freehold interest. So we're starting to notice some things now that are like mandatory when you're doing the input. I'm likely going to have another tab open or a printout of my property information sheet that my client signed. And I'm just kind of transferring over the information one for one. That's really kind of what you're ending up doing in this section, of course. Condo corporation. I'm going to go no. Common elements. Whoops, I clicked on the question mark there, sorry. Common elements, no. Waterfront, not in this case. And we're going to go no for garage. Okay, something to point out with regards to how the fields work as well. They are dynamic, which means that condo corporation, yes or no, will yield different mandatory results down the line. Okay, if I choose no, well, there won't be anything mandatory on my common elements screen. But if I choose yes, I'm going to have some things to enter on the common elements portion later on. They're dynamic in that sense. And how you refresh everything and see if it is going to accept the way that we've put in these values is by going down to your validate option. This is an option that I select pretty often while I go through an input. Validate is a really, really good way for it to just kind of refresh everything and double check that it's okay with your entries. So if I click validate, you'll notice, well, general doesn't have an exclamation point on it. However, there are some specific tabs that I know I have to address, that there's going to be some mandatory fields to fill out. The mandatory ones here are all accepted. As a result, the general tab doesn't have an exclamation point. Okay, so this kind of went over when I clicked validate and just checked everything. Now I'm starting to see like what are the things I'm really going to have to figure out here. If I change condo to a yes and clicked validate, there'd be an exclamation point next to common elements as well. Okay. Let's go left to right though. I'm going to hop into the property tab now and we'll look at a couple of things together on that screen. So what are some of the things actually to kind of notice that came in so far? Because we did fill from Geo Warehouse, if you remember. Things like our roll number, our PIN, which we would have to copy over anyways, and we want to make sure these are correct. Our seller name, it's a kind of corporation name. Street number, street name. So it looks like our exact address details aren't in full, but it did put in some minor information. So maybe it saved me like 20 seconds there. Our legal land description came through. Perhaps a little bit about our kind of lot frontage and depth. And something, usually you get a little bit of assessed value information as well. So again, it's not life-changing what comes through from Geo, but it's like some information that I needed to bring over anyways. So I find that it's a really solid base to start from. As we make some selections, right, we can see that the mandatory ones are highlighted right now. We might have some things to kind of fill out. And let's go through some of these really quick. So we've got Navy Street. There we are. City, Oakville. Just track that one down in the list. Postal code came through. Region, Halton, municipality, Oakville, neighborhood. Which neighborhood do we fall under? Okay, so if ever you're unsure about this, you know what? I'm going to give you a way that you can always make sure you get this Correct. So I'll actually leave it blank for now. We'll remember this one as one that we're going to come right back to. Right? What if I don't know right at this time? If I'm not super familiar, is it Old Oakville? Is it perhaps in Central Oakville? Maybe I want to get like a little bit better confirmation for myself. So we'll come right back to this one. Continue down. All right, so here's the part where don't get too hung up on some of the things that I put in, right? I'm just going to put, I don't know why I started with RA there, but here, I think it was about less than a half acre. It was a pretty small lot. Okay, directions, right? We said it was something to do with north of Lakeshore Road East. Where is my brain? Corner of Nady and Church. Okay, price. Well, we saw the recent sale was about 6 months ago for 5.5. I'm just going to go with a kind of a 5.9 here. And we are off and running with kind of some random selections here, right? Gonna have these from my property information sheet. Okay, so I think I got just about something into our mandatory fields here. Everything short of neighborhood just for now. Remembering, things may change as I continue through or I make some selections and I validate, right? There might be something new that kind of pops up. Something that because I chose a certain field that was mandatory and it happens to be dynamic, well, there might be something new that I have to fill out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on validate. And at this time, I want to show you something pretty important as well, which is, well, what if that was all that we were planning on doing just for today? What if I want to come back tomorrow and get back to work on it? I know that I only did the general and part of the property tab. What if I did save it as incomplete? Very, very important things have to happen for it to properly save your work. Okay, so this is a really, really important piece for you to understand. I'm going to hit save as incomplete here and just notice what specifically what happens. If I saved and it properly saved, it is going to give me a check mark and it's going to say input succeeded. Your listing has been successfully saved as incomplete. Here's your MLS number. This is actually the MLS number. This 401-24137 is the MLS number that my listing is going to hold as it kind of goes through from incomplete to eventually when it becomes active when I'm ready. This is its MLS number. It gives us that MLS number. It is crucial that you get this input succeeded or else you have not saved anything. Okay, you can see here that you can go back to continue editing after seeing this screen. You can, at this point, you can add and edit the photos if you want. Or also supplements, which is just if there's any attachments, right? Am I attaching a Schedule B? Is there a COVID form that I'm attaching? That would be your supplements. Photos pretty straightforward. I can continue editing. Zoom back out here because I went way in on that. I just clicked on the Oakville logo to get me back to my dashboard. Well, I saved it as incomplete. I got a confirmation that I saved it. Perfect. Now, 2 days later, I want to hop in and I want to continue working on my input. Well, I can add edit, click on input. Now that I saved one as incomplete, it should be in my listing ID dropdown, still in the input section. And it was this one here, 401-24137. When I click on that one, this incomplete with the letter I, we can go back in and start working on it again. Okay, so the first place that it takes you as you make your way into your listing once again is this modify listing screen. So I may as well say a couple of words as we make our way in as well. Okay, in your modify listing screen, this is where, and mine is going to look totally different than yours, so don't get too hung up on that. This is an administrative level board account that just has like every feature, okay? So you're not gonna have like certain staff features, of course, but I can go back in. If I click this button, I would go back into the input form where I'm putting in values. It is also this modify listing screen where I change it through the different statuses that it's going to hold as it goes from incomplete over to active status. Perhaps it moves to a conditional status at some point. Once the conditions are met and it firms up, I'm going to go into a pending status where it's going to hold its pending status until the close date. Right? You can see that it goes through all those different stages, and Some of those we are going to change through the modify listing screen. Okay. I can also delete the incomplete listing from this screen. You will have this button. So if you have like 56 incomplete listings, you can always delete them. It's right here. You don't have to call me on the phone to delete them for you. You can do that. I get that call sometimes and I'm like, yeah, you can do it. No worries. I'll show you where it is. Okay. So you can always delete an incomplete one. And you also have other managing buttons like now I want to do the photos, now I want to do the supplements, stuff like that. But if I'm just looking to go back into it, it's just the residential sale ad edit that we were working in. I'll just click on that and I'll zoom back out because I was really zoomed in there. There we go. So we're back to this part. We know we made these selections. We were on the property tab. We entered a few more values. We know that we left this one blank, but there might be some other ones, some dynamic ones that popped up, right? Oh, I put in a price. Looks like there's a new one here. Year built source as well. Like some things that if I click validate right now, there's a few that I might have to address after having saved. So let me go down. We know this one we've dealt with, or we are going to deal with that one in a second. Maybe there's a couple quick ones we have to do here. Ah, perfect. We have two new ones. HST applicable. Yes. Year built source. Well, we're going to say we have the builder's plans, even though we did do a really quick option there. But I'll just validate after making that selection. I just wanted it to be such that only this one was remaining because we're going to get to that one shortly. The reason why I really wanted to take some time and talk about that save as incomplete screen though is because, again, you haven't saved anything unless you get that very specific confirmation that gives you an MLS number. Okay, here's an example of like the opposite side of that. What if I don't get a confirmation? What would that look like? Well, perhaps I can do that by doing, I'm just going to break the form on purpose so you can see what that looks like. Something like possession date. I've seen this one before. Okay, so I'll just use this one as an example. What if you're going through here so quickly and you just, in this type of case, possession date is completely optional. There's no, I don't have to put anything in here unless specifically on my info data sheet, I chose like a possession date that is going to apply. You can see it's a calendar option, like the possession date being the 31st of July for some reason, whatever, right? Month, day, year. That's the structure of what goes into this field. Well, if I'm going through here super quick and I didn't notice, and maybe I did something really silly like this, possession date to be determined. Well, I'll tell you right now, it's not going to accept this. That's part of why the validate button is really good, because it would tell you, no, you cannot do that kind of thing. There'd be like an exclamation point here saying, no, you got to get rid of that. This needs to be month, day, year in that format. Now, you can't do that. There's a calendar reference to this piece. But I just put this in real quick. I wasn't paying attention. Notice what happens, right? I've got exclamation points across the top. I've got highlighted fields. What if I save as incomplete with something broken inside of a value? Or a broken value inside of I've got the wrong words. Inside of a kind of a box here for possession date, I have a value that I know is not going to be accepted. If I click save as incomplete, I did not get input succeeded. That's the real takeaway from this, okay? Which means I technically have not saved anything new that I've done today, okay? It looks very different as well, right? Very strange that nothing is highlighted in as a mandatory field anymore. Only my property tab has an exclamation point. None of the other ones do. This is like looking a little bit strange. This should be like an alarm bell should be going off. And when you go down and start to have a look, you'll see the only thing on here is there are errors on the input form, an exclamation point where it happened, and it's telling me, like, please help. You cannot do this. If I remove this, I can go back to normal and actually save it as incomplete. You have to get this, or else you haven't saved. We'll zoom in again. Notice that difference, right? The system was like yelling at me like, please make a change here, and then I will save it, but I cannot save it with TBD inside of that field. Okay, input succeeded means we've actually updated it. We've saved our work. That's our confirmation. You must see this anytime that you update it, save it, that kind of thing. Okay, I'm going to go back to continue editing here. Okay, and I'm just going to hit validate from the beginning. You know what? Let's just kind of refresh it. I'm going to hit validate, make sure that everything's good. We have an exclamation on property because we know we didn't do our neighborhood, but the rest should be good. And we did clear this out before saving, which is perfect. Okay. If I do every single one of these and I spend like 45 minutes, an hour working through it, maybe it's my first time, it's taking me a little bit of time to go through it, and then I go to save, I just close my laptop, and I never got the confirmation. Again, you got to get that confirmation or else you haven't saved your work, okay? How are we going to get the neighborhood though? I told you, we're going to make sure that we have this correctly. And where we're going to get that is through the map tab. Much like how we use the layer icon and the layer neighborhood layer on top of our map while searching, we can do that from this tab here. So we'll get our correct neighborhood in a few steps here. Let's actually move to the map tab to confirm all that. When you're working on the map section, there's one specific thing that you're doing on this screen, okay? And that's you're physically choosing the spot where the pin is going to show up visually. So it's important that you get that correct, okay? For a lot of reasons. I mean, so that anyone searching for your property can see the pin in the proper location, right? And how you do that is from this one description. Use set lat long manually to pin the map. It's mandatory. You just have to click this button here. It's like the only option you have on here practically. Okay, so you click set lat long manually. It pops up a bit of a window here. Because we have our address filled out, it kind of knows generally where we're working from, but it wants us to like pin specifically on this map. Like when my cursor's up here, you could see it's like a pointing arrow. As it comes onto the map, it changes into this like, I don't know, like a crosshair, I guess, for like pinning something. Specifically, I'm trying to hone in right on the property, which I know is at this corner here of Navy and Church if I zoom in on this interactive map. It's this one right here, and it just wants me to click to pin that. It drops a pin that you can move around, and I can be really accurate about where I set that pin up. Right? This is eventually going to become the green pin on the map when a different agent is looking for my property. Right? You're going to make sure that you have this pretty accurate on like the correct side of the road and stuff. It's just asking us to set the pin, choose a spot, right? I might go like, I know the lot is a little bit rectangular or whatever. If you want to halfway on the lot, more on the building, totally up to you, okay? But just got to be the right spot. And when you click locate, that's just how it kind of hones in and confirms it. You'll see it just kind of centers over top of it. So all I really did was I dropped the pin, I click locate, and I can click done, and I'm finished with the map tab. The whole point was just to pin this location. Before I leave in our example, however, right, I'm just going to click on the layer icon that we talked about, and I'm going to activate the neighborhood tab so that it gives me the answer that we need for that first property tab where we needed the neighborhood, where we weren't sure. Well, I know like we know this, but maybe in the case of like if I'm doing a listing in Kitchener and I'm not sure, well, I'm probably going to activate the neighborhood tab to tell me the exact boundaries through the different neighborhoods. Where is the line between Central Oakville and Old Oakville? Well, it happens to be the 16 Mile Creek, and we're very much pinned inside of Old Oakville. That is going to be the neighborhood that I'm going to choose. Okay, so I mean, I could just kind of deactivate the neighborhood tab. I could locate again if I want to just make sure it's confirmed, perfect. Click on done. I can see this part is finished. There's no exclamation point next to map. There's a good thumbs up for you. And when you go back to property, currently the only thing we have left is just selecting out of our list here. Well, we know that it's Old Oakville, and we can validate. So just like that, we have completed 3 of our first 3 tabs, and there's only like 1, 2, 3. There's 4 left that have some mandatory fields we have to go and address. Okay, we can kind of save as incomplete. We can validate throughout. But we know how to kind of navigate through here, right? Beauty. Okay, so moving forward here, a couple of these other tabs, especially things like brokerage and exterior, I might not make every single selection, actually. These ones I wanted to clear out to show you getting rid of that exclamation point. But for me to put in a commission structure, I think is like, you don't need me to put in 2.5% here or something like that, right? So I'll just stick to the ones that usually cause some questions, and we'll focus on those ones. As we go into the brokerage section, okay, we can see it pulls in my information, which is great. Under listing information, we have certain dates that we're going to be setting out. Okay, so none of that to be determined stuff. We know better than that. We're going to be kind of choosing a calendar option. Commencement date, I do get questions about this one sometimes. So let's just take like 30 seconds and talk about that. So the ruling, and to give you the best like answer, because the question that I get often with commencement date is like, hey, I signed this agreement with my client. It was from yesterday is the commencement date. Am I still okay to list the property today, even though I kind of missed that commencement date by 1 day, kind of thing? Well, how the system works, to give you like the definition of the rules of the MLS system, is how it's stated is you have within 24 hours from the commencement date to submit your listing and have it available on the MLS system. And how that marker for within 24 hours actually works is you can think of it as midnight the following day. So technically, if I signed an agreement and the commencement date was today, just bear with me here, but technically the system will still let me submit it tomorrow night at 10 p.m. That's still fine. You're still within the rules of the within 24 hours to have it active and available. Okay. If there's any questions about that one, well, we can definitely talk about it a little bit more for Q&A and stuff like that as well. But just so you're aware, right? And the system will account for times that there are, statutory holidays, things like that, right? It gives you a little bit of leeway. The times that it might be a bit different is when someone calls me on the phone and they're like, hey, I'm trying to submit my listing. It's not letting me. It's failing business rules with regards to a date. It's just giving me this weird error that says that it failed. Okay, and we started to talk about it, and it's like, okay, when is your commencement date? Oh, my commencement date was the 16th of May. Okay, well, you're 2 weeks out of your commencement date. For good reason, the system's not going to let you submit that. Okay, so yes, in that case, your listing is going to have to match the paperwork that you signed with your client. So you may have to amend your paperwork before you move forward and you begin that. Okay, but if it's still within the rules of the MLS system, the system is going to allow you to submit it. Okay, so that's just how the commencement date portion works. You do have this little buffer where, especially with the rule, it is of the commencement date, you have within 24 hours, which is the next day at midnight, you can still submit that. Okay, the sooner that you do it, the better, of course, but just so you are aware, there is some leeway with regards to that exact date. Okay, expiration, well, here, we'll start by putting in a value. We're going to say ours is pretty straightforward. We're really keen. We're just doing it the day of our commencement. We're not missing it by any number of days or anything like that. Let's go ahead and select today's date, the 3rd of June. Our expiration date, maybe something to mention with this is, well, there's no minimum or maximum per se. Okay, if this was kind of, I don't know, we're just going to choose something pretty standard here. I'm going to say that this is going to be roughly a couple of months, 2-3 months kind of thing. So we're going to the 31st of August is going to be our expiration date just for this case. But I didn't want to, just with it not having a min or max, our system doesn't have one. Okay, I just wanted to mention that though, because some agents might be dual members, and this is a part that might be a little bit different if you're really, really used to doing inputs on the TREB system. I have heard some members mention, hey, there's minimum, I can't do it if it's less than a week or whatever the case. Well, there's no issue with this one. There's no min or max. It's going to be matching your paperwork is the important part. Okay, pretty straightforward here. The rest of the stuff is like things that you're going to have set out, your situation with the agreement, with your client, your brokerage, all that kind of stuff. Pretty specific instructions moving forward as well. Are you using a specific type of lockbox? What kind of showing system? Regular instructions. Maybe something to point out on this one, however, because this one does come up actually. Forgot. Offer instructions is a box that's a little bit newer. You do have 250 characters here where you can provide some offer instructions if there are some specific offer instructions, and this is the place for it, okay? If all offers are to be submitted to a specific email address by a specific time, this is the box where it goes. It doesn't go in the public remarks. It doesn't go in the private remarks either. This is the spot for it, okay? So if you're ever filling this out on ITSORealEstate.ca, make note of that. It's optional because there's no mandatory offer instructions, but if there's something specific you're including, this would be the spot for it, okay? It pretty well covers the things on this particular screen though. So let's hit the ground running with some of these. I know rooms is one that we definitely want to talk about, so I'm going to go a little quicker on some of these others. Based on an info data sheet, we're going to have all this filled out. As I said, right, I don't need to state whether this is a concrete building or if it's a municipal sewers or if it has a flat roof or anything like that. So pretty straightforward stuff. Just kind of selecting options, exactly how they're coming over from our info data sheet on those ones. Okay, let's go ahead and maybe hop to the rooms details because that one's more specific. Okay, you notice that the rooms section is going to start with the description of the rooms. We're going to follow it up with a section on our inclusions and exclusions, as well as public remarks, private remarks, and then we're pretty well good to go, right? One of the last things that we're going to do just for today's, and then we know if we ever got to do that next step and put in the photos and things like that, well, we're going to save as incomplete, possibly jump into our modify listing screen, and then go to the photo section. So we'll go look at that really quick after as well. In our rooms section though, it's a really specific way that we enter rooms. It has to do with feet, okay? The length, the width, this is all in feet. It'll show the feet and meters as units of measurement later on down the road when you submit it. But the way that you enter the values is one specific way. It has to do with how many feet and inches everything is broken down to. Okay, so when you're filling out your property information sheet or if you're jotting down this information, just be prepared for that. The way that you're going to enter it is as feet and inches. Another thing is you are going to enter every single room one at a time. Okay, I'm going to click on more when I need more rooms and stuff like that. I can see that button down here. I know I'm really zoomed in, so it's hard to see like the total right-hand side. Try to center it a bit more. And important as well, when you're doing different rooms, some of them might have dynamic fields. What's mandatory for a bedroom might be different than what's mandatory for a bathroom. So let's maybe just talk about that real quick. If I chose something like a main floor bedroom, and I'll click on more so that I could do a comparison to a main floor bathroom real quick. You can see I have both of them selected here. I put a value into the two mandatory fields for now. And if I click on validate, right, just trying to get both on screen so you can see, when I click on validate, it's going to refresh that. And it's going to tell me what sort of stuff I need to enter for those two room types. Well, for the bedroom, I must enter the dimensions. However, the features are optional. If I'm entering a bathroom, my dimensions are optional, but my room features are mandatory. Note, like, very significant difference between a room and a bathroom. Okay, so let's talk about those a little bit. First off, how I enter the information here, of course, right? I'm going feet and inches. If I'm going with something like, well, 22 feet 6 inches, right? I'm not putting like like 200 or whatever that ends up being. I'm not going to do the math in my head right now, but I'm putting like 20 feet 6 inches by, sorry, I think I said 22, sorry, by, let's say, 19 feet 10 inches. Well, it would be like this. Okay. I do get the call from time to time, and I just kind of break this down so you have it as like a mental note. Geez, I'm gonna have to just pull out a calculator because I'm not gonna be able to do that math real quick. Let me go calculator. 22 times 12, 264 plus 6 inches, right? 22 feet 6 inches is the same as 270 inches technically, but that's not how I enter this, right? You're not trying to do like feet as like a 22.5 measurement, and you're not doing inches as the total inches. It's just what is the value for the feet and the value for the inches. Hopefully that's like a better description of like, this is the way that you enter it. Okay, and it'll talk about that a little bit from the top here. Okay, 19 feet 10 inches, just whole numbers, no decimals or anything like that. I'm just entering these values in, and I can also hit validate to double check, right? If I left this one blank and I put 276, it's going to give me that exclamation point straight away right next to it saying, yo, hold on, that's not good. Okay, 22, 6, 19, 10. Technically, I am meeting the requirements for the bedroom. On my info data sheet, though, if I stated and signed with my client that there's hardwood floors or specific features, even though this is optional, I'll make that selection, but it's not mandatory for a bedroom. Moving on to the bathroom, totally different. If I have the dimensions of the bathroom, I'm going to go ahead and put them in. However, just be aware it's not mandatory to put these in. The really important part for a bathroom, as you know, is all comes down to whether it's a full bath or a half bath. Okay, and we know a full bath is going to be anything that's 3 pieces or more, and a half bath is 2 pieces or less. We're going to say this one's a full bath, and I'm just going to go ahead for example purposes here. I'm going to say it's a 3-piece, which we know is going to qualify this one as a full bath. Okay, we could say it's like a sink, toilet, shower kind of thing. It's a 3-piece bath. Okay, and I might hit validate. Okay, just to get that kind of mental check mark that I'm done the first room and the second room. Now I'm moving on to the third room here. And the same thing's going to happen. I'm going to go one at a time. I'm going to do my kitchen, whatever kind of living room, dining room, exercise room, whatever might come up. We're going to go through them one at a time, each floor kind of thing. Something that might be important to keep in mind, though, you do want to strategize how you lay these out, because they're going to show up exactly in the order that you input them here. I can't change the order later on. Really important. I can't just like grab this one, and I know it's a little bit inconvenient in that case. I can't just grab the bathroom and drag it and just drop it on top of this one so that it changes the order. It's the order that you enter them in. So if I do like 15 different rooms and then I realize that, oh my goodness, my 16th room was my ensuite and I want it to be up by my master bedroom at the top, I'm going to have to delete like almost everything to start from the beginning again. Okay, so something really good to make a note of. These orders, you're not going to change them. Okay, it's in the order that you input them. Okay. I'm going to do one more really quick because we'll talk about this one in our conclusion. Basement bedroom. I'm going to have to put some dimensions, so I'm just going to go with 23 feet 2 inches and 19 feet 8 inches. Okay, we're good with the bedroom. I'm going to hit more, put in a bathroom down there. Basement, bathroom, and it's going to be a 2-piece bath, sink and toilet. So we now have a half bath in the basement. We'll talk about those a bit later when we're looking at the preview of our listing. The last thing on here right now for our input right now is the inclusions, of course. And I just want to say a couple of words about the public remarks. You have an immense amount of space when it comes to the public remarks, okay? Testing amount of characters in this box in the public remarks. Wow. Okay, so if I take this kind of quick sentence, I used about 52 characters to create that. Like, start to get a look at this mammoth-sized paragraph that I have access to in describing this. And it just kind of counts down until you run out of space. I'm over by 80 characters. Okay, I have 18 left. Right now I would have 25 characters left, but like, look at this immense space. This is provided to you to put a really great marketing description of the property. Disclaimers, like, please, like, just use this space. There's nothing that frustrates me more, and I don't know if you're on the same boat as me, but looking at a property and agent just did not put anything here. They put like literally like, this is a house, and they put a period, and they just moved on to private remarks. And they're like, and they start just putting a whole bunch of different stuff, right? Like, that's not enough. Please, whether you like it or not, as well, the individual that might be contacting you regarding your property has changed drastically over the past few years as well. It could be just like a regular individual that's just looking at realtor.ca, saw your listing share through on a totally third-party MLS system, and they just want some details about the property. So something else that might not work is something like this. Like, jargon that only applies to a real estate agent or another member kind of thing also probably isn't going to fly, because your user base and your target audience is so vast these days. Okay, so like, spelling mistakes go without mention. Abbreviations, like, you want to make it a nice, concise paragraph that anyone could understand. And I hate that I have to say that, but I have to say that because I see some really strange stuff come through in these spots sometimes. Okay, so you have a lot of space. 2,000 characters for public remarks, 850 characters for private remarks. Okay, as you follow that up, I know we just hit our 3 p.m. timeline. I don't want to like quickly, concisely crush stuff in to try and fit it all in the next 60 seconds. So I do want to, at this time, I'm going to say, I do apologize. We did go a little bit over our time. I went really, really thoroughly into some of our categories. I'm probably going to speak for another 10 minutes or so. A couple last things I want to show you, a preview of the listing, the photos section, and we'll just do a quick conclusion. Then I'll stop the recording and we'll do a Q&A if anybody wants to stick around or has extra questions. But I'm not going to speed up anything here. I'm going to talk for about 10 more minutes. And if you do have to take off, I really do apologize. Catch the recorded video if you want to catch that last 10 minutes. But yeah, we're going a little bit over today, and I'm sorry about that. Okay. I hit save as incomplete after having filled out a good amount of information on my listing. What I'd like to do right now, though, is show you how to get to the photos, because it is mandatory that you enter a photo of the property when you go to submit it. If I try to submit it with what we had before, even if we filled out all those mandatory fields, we still have to add a photo to actually submit it. I could do that after clicking Save as Incomplete. I get an Edit Photo button, puts me in here. If I hit Cancel, okay, and I just want to navigate away from here to show you, the other spot where you're going to see this section for photos is when you go into the input. And as we know, we select it from our list, choose the one we're working on. And in our modify listing towards the bottom, we have a manage photos button as well. Same thing. If I click manage photos, it looks just like that. It just refers to our MLS listing we're working on. And we have the option to browse in up to 50 photos. What I would suggest is the best way to approach this. And you can see, first off, it gives you your recommended file size for each individual image. 1024 by 768 pixels is the size for the photos. What I find is the best way to do this is I put all of the photos into a folder, and the order that I want those photos to show up in, I just rename them from, let's say there's 20 photos. I rename them from 1 to 20. Try and give you an example. Documents, nope, desktop. Sorry, I'm just pulling this from my other screen. Give me 2 seconds. Here we are. Here's a random property. If I was bringing in 11 photos, this is exactly what I would do. I would rename them in the order that I want. And then when I browse them, I just browse in all of them at once to go from 1 to 11. And then they just pop in from 1 to 11, 1 being my main image, 11 being my last one. That's the best way to do the photos, because the last thing I want is to just start dragging them, swapping them around. And then the system is a bit touchy when you do that. It gets a little confused. Way better to just browse them all at once from 1 to, if it is 1 to 50, name them 1 to 50 and browse them all in the order that you like them. Put them in that folder. It's going to save you so much time doing it that way. Okay, but you just browse them in and then you certify and save. Okay, I'm going to cancel out. I'm not bringing any photos in for 125 Navy for our silly house version of 125 Navy. Okay, and the last thing I mentioned that I would show is a preview of our current listing. If you ever want to access the preview, like what does it actually look like? I can preview it before I change it to active status. Right now it's still incomplete status. I want to look at it though. I can look at it from the My Matrix menu in the My Listings section. Okay. If my computer loads, you can see it's just kind of pinwheeling over here. I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi seems to be a bit slow today. When you go to your My Listings screen, please do not be worried when you see a 0 over here. Okay, it says My Listings 0. Oh no, that's totally fine. Okay, it's showing me specifically what's here, and I don't have any under My Closed Listings. It looks like the last thing I was in the category My Closed Listings, which is why it's showing 0. If I click on this and I go to My Incomplete and Pending Activation Listings, well, that's where this one here was that we worked on today, the 24137 with incomplete status. And if I click on it, I'm going to see that listing in its preview form. Okay. If I want to go to my active listings, I have to switch it. My pending listing, my closed listings, that's all under My Listings, but you have to change this drop down for the one you're looking at. If I go to my hit counter or like my open houses, or right, you're going to want to go to incomplete. Just in our case, click on the listing itself, the MLS number, and we can see the preview. Old Oakville, our really funny breakdown of like our 1+1, 1+1 here, and the understandably pretty empty section right now where we haven't done public remarks and we haven't put in any photos or anything like that. But we can still preview, hey, what is this going to look like? What does the room section look like? Well, they came in bedroom, bathroom, main, bedroom, bathroom, basement, dimensions, my dimensions, feet and inches, as well as the conversion to meters, how many pieces, right? Like you can start seeing the preview of your listing, even if it's incomplete. Okay. I do want to say some final words about this, and then we'll more formally conclude, as I mentioned, within that 310 timeline that I gave us. So what is going on over here in this chart? Why do we have a 1+1 and another 1+1 with regards to the bathrooms? On our system, it is different than the TREB system. Very important to understand that. The way that bedrooms are described, possibly how bathrooms are described, might be a little bit different on our system than TREB. So let me just give you a definition of what it looks like for us as OMDREB members, as well as the other 21 boards that are sharing information on ITSORealEstate.ca. We all enter the information the same way on this system. And 1+1 for us means something very specific. Whenever you see AG, BG, okay, it's referring to above grade and below grade. So this is just talking about main floor and above, and BG, below grade, is just basement. Quickest, easiest way to think about it, okay? Right? If I'm thinking about square footage AG, that's a main floor up. Square footage BG, basement square footage. Right? You can see here that hopefully you can kind of work out as well that for bathrooms in our system, it's just showing in the brackets F and H. Well, it's referring to a full bath and a half bath. So our 1+1, that's not talking about a den or anything like that. On our system, it's talking about a room being in the basement is our +1. Okay, our +1 down here under bathrooms is because we also put in a half bath at some place in the property. We have one full bath, one half bath. That's our 1+1. We have one bedroom main floor and above, one bedroom in the basement. Okay, I just want to just give you a quick description there. That is how it is set up on our system.